Hi, my name's Siobhan Algio and I'm the Program Director at Monash University for the Master of Project Management and the Master of Project Leadership. Welcome to this event. We're going to be covering off some really interesting discussions around whether you're job ready for the project management profession. I'll do an acknowledgement of country because we are situated on the Kulin Nations, and I would like to acknowledge the people of the Kulin Nations and their land that we're gathered here today on, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I'll hand over now to the President of the AIPM's Victorian Chapter, Chris Latcham.
Thank you, Siobhan, and thank you everyone for attending. So just as a quick introduction to the Australian Institute of Project Management, I just wanted to show one slide with some information about who we are. The Australian Institute of Project Management has about 8,000 members across Australia. We welcome student membership through to very senior members and fellows, and as a not-for-profit organisation we provide a range of services for people in the project management profession and the project industry. That includes certifications, that includes events, collaborations, a nationally recognised awards program, and in particular advocacy on matters that are important to project professionals. So as aspiring project managers, we welcome your attendance at this event. We thank all of the universities that have been involved in this in setting up this event, and we hope that this special interest group that between the AIPM and the Victorian-based universities will continue into the future for a whole bunch of future events as well. And I'll now like to introduce Lee Seminelli. Lee is the, if I can just unshare the screen. Lee Seminelli will be the facilitator for this meeting. He is past president of the board of AIPM nationally and has years and years of experience in the Australian Institute of Project Management. So I'll hand over to him and leave him in your good hands.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Siobhan, and welcome to our virtual audience logging in today from all parts of the country, no doubt. I also would like to especially welcome our guest speakers today, all very experienced practitioners and specialists working in the project management field or a related management capacity. They've all got very diverse backgrounds and insights into project management and profession. So over the next hour or so, we'll pose a few questions to them and help tease out the main question of when will you be ready for the project management profession. So shortly after that, and the discussion with our guests, we'll throw open the floor to our audience and for questions you may have on the concepts and issues discussed today and anything that you think is related. Firstly, let me introduce our guest speakers. Luke Belford. Luke is the Director of Asset Strategy and Projects within the Office of Projects Victoria. Tamara Vaughan, a more recent graduate from RMIT in project management. And she's also the National Business Development Coordinator for the Women in Design and Construction. And hopefully we'll have a bit of an opportunity to talk about that a bit further later on tomorrow. And finally, let me introduce Nick Rockerell. Nick is the Director of ProNexus, an executive search and selection agency. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us. It's very generous of you. Look, I'll come to you first, if I could. Over the last few years, I've often wondered what the motivation for people to join the profession and become a project manager. And you've probably heard the term, I'm an accidental project manager. And I guess as opposed to it being an aspirational project manager. So by way of introduction, I'd like to commence by asking you the question, and indeed all of our speakers, when and how you first became involved in the profession of project management.
Yeah, thanks, Lee. I would say it is accidental, but also deliberate. I graduated from Melbourne as an engineer, and engineering is very much focused on the project profession. And so I started off in the oil and gas and petrochemical sector, and projects are the bed, a lot of the bread and butter for that industry, and certainly worked on some very large projects to start off there. But if you work in engineering or construction, projects are often how companies implement their strategy and get things done. So very much accidental, but also deliberate.
Let's cut both corners. That's great. Thanks, Luke. Tamara, you're a more recent graduate.
Yeah, I am. And I think what got me into project management at the start was I actually had a maths teacher say, hey, you would be a really good project manager. And at the time I had no idea what it was. So I did a little bit of research into it and then thought, hey, this looks kind of good. And I liked subjects like physics and maths. And I originally wanted to do engineering, but then I found the project management course at RMIT. And that really aligned to what I wanted to do. So from that, I went into that course, and it was a 4-year course with honours. It is quite different because majority of PMs that I meet in the industry have come from a civil background or a construction management background.
Right.
I purely just studied project management. So that's kind of how I got into it, and then made the move to a contractor after that.
Right, so the teacher was a major influence.
Yeah, definitely, but
interesting.
It aligned.
Good on you. And thanks, Nora. And Nick, you're in a very different role to both Luke and Tamara. What was your first involvement?
Look, I'm probably the one here who's not classic or accidental project management per se, but look, I really work with exec teams, boards, and we really talk around their involvement in projects, success and believe failures that they have. And we really want to work with organizations understanding what they look for in the right project management talent and how that's evolved. So what are the skills that they're looking for? And we've got a real passion in making sure that organizations, if we use the term, deliver projects on time and in budget, and those projects actually deliver the desired outcomes by finding the right project people for those organizations.
That's a really important point. We'll certainly come back to some of those things, particularly in the concept of the future of work and where graduates and universities fit into that. Thanks, guys. Look, I'll come back to you if I could, more on the lines of, now you're a very experienced practitioner. As you said, you worked in oil and gas, you've worked in a variety of sectors, you've worked as a consultant. So I suppose the project management context, where I'll be really interested in to hear what your thoughts are on what does job ready actually mean then, given all that experience. So particularly in the terms of how does one prepare, what knowledge, qualifications, attitude would they require?
Yeah, I've got to also say that when I started out in, I guess, profession after graduating, project management was not necessarily front and center as a profession. I still remember the graduate interview I went to, and the normal question was, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? And I thought, oh, okay, I'll be a bit ambitious. I said, and one of the guys interviewing me, because they're both men working heavy industry, it's very gender diverse, but it's improving. But he said, do you see yourself in 5 years' time? And I sort of said, oh, I'd like to be a project manager, not knowing that the guy opposite me was a project manager. And in that type of industry, a project manager would be responsible for 300 people. So it was a very senior role. And so he obviously took my ambition as something that, the company needed a lot more of. So, and he hired me, but I would say for anyone coming into the profession today, that they need to understand that project management is very different across different industries, across different professions. And I would say it's really important to understand what are the differences. For instance, IT or business project management is completely different from construction And in construction, there's many different facets to industries, whether it's renewables, heavy industries, or civil infrastructure. But I would say get interested about what industries and what you want to do, and also understand that project management can take a while before you are a project manager for a big project. And it is really important to understand what are the different skill sets a project manager really needs to have in their tool set. So hone your skills and understand how it's applied differently in different industries. And really the focus is on.
And so how do you prepare? We'll certainly come to that. At least you didn't say to the interviewer, I'll be sitting in your seat in 5 years' time. So often not a good start to a thing. So given that, Luke, and given that there are so many different facets and so many different enterprises and industries, as you say, how does a new grad or any person, project manager, actually prepare to be job ready then?
I would say it almost starts in the university course and applying for internships and internships in different places as well. Don't be afraid to try different parts of the industry or the spectrum. For instance, go work on a construction project, go work for an IT company or a business company that delivers, or give management consulting a try, because they also do a lot of different project aspects, and they're often at a completely different level.
Be careful of those consultants there, mate. they can be dangerous there. Before we come to Tamara, I've got a final question for you, at least at this stage. How does any new graduate actually prepare for the challenges of next year? Should be, and hopefully will be, a little different to the 2020 year. So the challenges of 21 and beyond, what are your thoughts about how does one prepare for that?
Yeah, it's coming into a very different space. I think we haven't, in government, we haven't been told when we will be going back to face-to-face workplaces. So I think it'll be virtual. But saying that, it's there's a big momentum and push towards more digital tools and project management, which is really great to see, and collaboration. So I would say it's a bit of when you're starting off in the profession, it's always a bit of a catch-22 in terms of people want experienced hires, but at the same time, how do people get that experience? So I think internships or being able to demonstrate, what are people's passions? Have they invested in more than just their qualification to sort of get into it? Able to show that attitude or that willingness to learn beyond their qualifications.
Yes, good points there. We'll certainly come back to them. Thanks, Luke. Tamara, you probably have some thoughts on some of those same subjects. And as I said at the intro, I think you graduated in 2017.
Yeah.
Right? You spent a few years in Jacobs and the agency in Victoria, etc. As a new, if I can call you a recently graduated student, what were you thinking about how to prepare to be job ready?
Yeah, look, I think it really does go off the back of what Luke said as well about knowing the different disciplines and industries. For instance, my title now is PM, but if I was working on contractor side, I'd probably be a junior CA or something. And it depends so much on each industry. So having that knowledge and researching the sectors, and again, IT is completely different to anything construction related. And yeah, kind of having that knowledge. But for me, I found it was a lot about my attitude and how I approached my job search in terms of being proactive and going out there and knowing different companies as well. So not just knowing the sectors, but knowing the companies and delving into that. And then from that, I expanded networks. I established some mentors, and then I went out there and actually shadowed at a company, which was great exposure. And that developed experience that I could talk about when I was going for interviews. So I would definitely recommend any kind of volunteering work or shadowing to get yourself out there and just to know a bit more about projects and the industry and where you align in that. Yeah, so in terms of qualifications, obviously I came from a project management background, and there is that whole argument of, you know, requiring technical skills and all of that, which I'm sure we'll come to later. But for me, I think what really helped me out was in interviews was actually going in there with really positive attitude and a can-do attitude, being proactive. And I think ultimately that's what got me hired.
Right. You also mentioned mentoring, volunteering, shadowing, some pretty critical factors there.
Definitely. And even I've done an event with RMIT and some really proactive students did reach out to me and say, hey, can we have a virtual coffee catch up? And I took that as, well, great, like it's such a hard time at the moment and these students have been proactive to reach out to me. So, you know, I had that session with them and it was really lovely, and to be able to provide that support to them was really great as well, because I was in their position 3-4 years ago.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. So just picking up on what you're saying, once you're in the role, you've landed the position, you're in there, up to your neck in snakes and all sorts of things there. How does one advance in terms of either professional development or indeed up the ranks, as they say?
So in my position, I started at Jacobs as an assistant project manager. And when I got in there, I looked at my career framework and I thought, right, this is what I need to progress. And within that, we look at the career progression, but then there's also a sense of just going out there and taking opportunities when they come. So I had a really great opportunity to work on rail projects, or to work as in the joint venture for Rail Projects Victoria, which exposed me to a range of stakeholders, all different types of project management, working in centralized functions rather than just consulting or client-side PM work. So I think that was really good for me to go back to when we did have performance reviews to say, hey, this is the exposures I've gotten. I'm client facing here. You know, I've had access to these stakeholders. I know how to do this and this and this. And ultimately that helped me progress. But on the other side of that, I did also get involved in WIDAC, which is Women in Design and Construction. So I spent a lot of time networking, building my networks and relationships. And those relationships can definitely be useful in the future when companies are looking for work, and for multiple reasons it's great to have a broad network. So I used that as well as separate professional development, and then also opportunities that I took up to advance.
Right. Yeah. Tell us more, just a little bit more about that particular association then. What's the objective?
Look, so Women in Design and Construction, we're basically promoting women in those areas. So we organise events and workshops. They're normally monthly. At the moment, we're all virtual online. And these can be anything from a technical civil workshop to how to baby-proof your career. So we, address a lot of different subjects, and we're not only women, so males do come, and all different ages and diversities are more than welcome. And yeah, that's kind of what we do.
That's good. I'm interested too in a couple of things you've said, and picking up on what Luke was saying. But you sort of hinted also, what's 21 going to mean to you and more recent graduates, do you think? What are those challenges?
Yeah. Look, it is such a challenging time and we don't know what's going to happen. No one can forecast the future. So I think at the moment what recent grads can do is invest time in researching, looking at the budgets, seeing what areas government's funding, and aligning their professional development with those. So whether it's, going into the defence space or, focusing on transport infrastructure, I think, going out, being proactive, doing that extra research, that can really benefit graduates.
Right, and then, I'm hearing that, a bigger pardon, go ahead, Tamara.
Oh, I was also just going to acknowledge that, you know, obviously IT is advancing quite rapidly, and to be proactive in actually learning those systems that might not be utilised at the moment in the industry, but in a couple of years or 5 years' time, they might be regular. So
yeah. I'm hearing that same message coming from both you and Luke about research there. Yeah. Okay, we'll certainly come back to some of those issues you mentioned there. Thanks, Tamara. And Nick, welcome, mate, again. Full disclosure, Nick and I have known each other a little while from a not-for-profit perspective, so welcome back, Nick. Now, you're in a totally different role, as you said earlier, to both Luke and Tamara there. As a director of a major search and selection agency, what are your thoughts about job readiness? What's the sort of message you give your potential clients or clients of your clients?
And look, I think Tamara and Luke have made some great points. And I think there are small levels of detail that Tamara has gone to that make all the difference. Because if we look at a market, there may be a number of graduates or individuals that are applying for positions or looking for positions. And I think one of the comments that Luke certainly has come out and Tamara has come out repeatedly is preparation. I think the thing is that people realize whether or not you have prepared and have gone the extra mile to demonstrate your desire or passion to want to join an organization. And Tamara mentioned it very well that, you know, do some research. Actually, you know, people want to know that you have a passion to want to join that organization. It's not saying, I want to go into construction. Well, as Lucas said, construction is huge. There's so many different facets to construction, and so many within an organization. Construction means so many things. So really start to narrow that down. And again, I'm going to come back to tomorrow. One of the things that's really important that is highlighted is also attitude. Persistence in this situation is absolutely critical. And graduates are probably feeling it more than a lot of the economy and society, but it's the same for a lot of people. You know, you're absolutely going to get setbacks along the journey, but you need to keep on pushing on. Unfortunately, this is the sign of the times that we operate in, but an employer also wants to know that, you know, things aren't always going to go your way. You're going to come across challenging situations, and do you have the mental resolve to be able to push through and come through that? And that's a real testimony to individuals. So I think that attitude is really important. And look, I think there's an element, and we haven't touched on it, and we're likely to, that I think there's an element of technical skills, but one of the things that people consistently talk about is soft skills. So I think communication is absolutely critical. And that's two-way communication. I think we're also operating in an environment where communication's maybe that little bit more difficult because you're not necessarily physically sitting opposite someone. So influencing people and having that communication is absolutely, it could present a very different dynamic for a lot of people. So I think they're things that are going to be very, very important. They're the key things that I think, and look, I think both Luke and Tamara have mentioned, look for internships. You know, most universities have got quite good associations with industry. Start to utilize that, whether that's internship, really understand what the university can do for you. And I think that's an important facet for most graduates to be able to use the facilities that are available. And I think the other absolute critical thing, and I recently wrote an article on this, is the whole notion of networking. Unfortunately, what you tend to find is that a lot of people start networking when it's too late, and they don't necessarily realize the importance of doing it really early on in the piece. And networking may not necessarily be for a job, but you can go to a network to ask some advice. You may, and look, and maybe I'm showing my age here, but there may be graduates who've got parents that are in various industries that they can go and talk to. And so, you know, you work in the university sector, or you work in construction, or what is it like? Can you tell me a little bit more information? And I think this is all part of the information gathering. How have you gone the extra mile to demonstrate the attitude around you really wanting to show that you've done something, and it starts to set you out from the crowd.
Right. And that's interesting. Would these messages be the same 10 years ago? Would you advise exactly the same thing?
Look, I think, believe it or not, I don't think much has changed other than the fact that we've seen technology advance. I think, you know, dare I say, we now have so many different opportunities to be able to network through social networking. And one of the things that I focused on in the article is there's a lot of people that are quite nervous when they walk in a room and see a whole room of people and go, oh my God, my hands are sweaty. Oh, what am I going to do? But now you've got the opportunity to communicate with people through so many different mediums, whether it's LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, whatever is appropriate for that individual. And I think you can utilize those various different mediums. So I think that's the element that's changed. If anything, you can utilize it for your benefit rather than seeing it as a hindrance. I think the opportunity to communicate and talk to people is so different now than perhaps where it was 10 years ago. You know, we all have email. You know, there's no harm. And I know it can be nerve-wracking at the point, but if there's someone that you want to connect with, drop them an email. And the worst thing that could happen is they don't respond. Don't take it personally. That person may be busy, or there's a reason they don't connect. But they're the persistent elements of going out there and putting yourselves to some extent in an uncomfortable situation.
Yeah. Again, some pretty important concepts there. Thanks, Nick. Just very quickly, I'm interested in what your thoughts are about the future challenges. What's next year and beyond going to have for us, do you think?
I think just to extend on a point that I touched earlier, which is I think you need hard skills, and by that I mean qualifications, but it's how you can add those qualifications and adapt the various methodologies to the situations that you're in. I think one thing that's going to play an even more important role is this notion of communication. So they're often referred to as soft skills. It's really going to be around how you can talk to people, how you can relate to people without necessarily being physically in an environment with them. Mm-hmm. And I think the other thing as well is that for most people, they need to continuously learn, grow their knowledge, and continue to develop and evolve. I think, look, there will absolutely be certain challenges that may be posed, but in not only in Australia, but I think if you look globally, most countries are looking at getting themselves out of this challenge by investing in projects. And it seems to be the one thing that most countries are doing to stimulate the economy. So hopefully that money will start to filter down and we'll start to see the growth. But you need to put yourself in a position to take advantage of it, not try and take advantage of it when it's there.
Yeah. Thanks, Nick. Well, there's quite a few questions coming through, as you can see. So we've got basically questions for all of you there. But I'd like to sort of start with back to Luke, if I could. I think all three of you have mentioned the fact of a technical skill set first, and presumably we're talking about I assume a qualification in project management or something fairly related. So does a graduate need to actually have a technical background and in a specific field like construction, IT, whatever, or can they be that generalist, come in from a totally different area and still be a PM?
Yeah, well, I'd say the biggest role for a project manager is managing the risk for a project and also just delivering on the activities. And I'd say risk is understanding all the different facets of a project and how they come together, so those systemic type issues. But also, like, we've had a bit of a narrative on communications. Communication's one of those tools where you can help distill that risk and understand it a lot more. So having a technical background does help a lot with understanding that risk exposure. And I would say it's really important to give it a go and to be curious and to try and understand the different facets of a project. Just so that you understand at a broader level how everything fits together and what the importance of are.
Yeah. So you can still take a helicopter view if you like, but you still need to have a good working knowledge, I suppose. Is that the sort of message there? Yeah,
it is. I mean, a lot of people usually start from a technical base and then work their way up and be a project manager or project director or something, or senior project executive. it usually starts from some sort of core technical expertise.
Yeah.
And I would say throughout your career, it's really important to make yourself as broad as possible and understanding how the challenges and how all of those different components fit together.
Yeah. Okay, no, thanks for that. We've got a question for Tamara coming through there. And it's something you mentioned a little bit earlier. To the person who submitted that authorizer, you mentioned a little bit earlier, Tamara, and made a bit of a point about mentoring. How does one actually choose the right mentor? What sort of things do you look for? And the question in focus was, it actually came from an international student who came to Australia without knowing anybody. Yep. So I suspect there's quite a few people in that situation. What sort of things would you recommend there?
Well, firstly, in terms of my experience, so I did have a mentoring program at Jacobs and I went into that. However, after that, once I was working in the industry, I actually noticed who I thought would be a great mentor for me, who would align in a way that, I wasn't necessarily in the same discipline as them, but I really liked their leadership style or something like that. So I actually sent an email and asked if they would be keen to mentor me. And I guess in relation to this student who's international, you could approach it in a LinkedIn scenario. So obviously send like a personalized message and establish a relationship first. Don't just, off the bat, just say, hey, can you be my mentor? I think just a question and stuff like that. And then from that, it can turn into something else. So in this person's situation, that's probably what I would recommend. But also we do have a heap of programs. So I'm not sure if AIPM have a mentoring program, but
they do.
Yeah. So get into one of those programs, or even WIDAC has a program as well. I know NAWIC has a program. There's quite a few industry bodies that actually deliver mentoring programs. And I would really suggest that's a way that you could go in and not really, you get matched, and normally these industry bodies pair you with, appropriate mentors for your stage of career or student or whatever you are.
Yeah. I will add, and no doubt Chris will have a thought on this too. I can see his head nodding there. AIPM do have a very established mentoring program, long established, in fact. And again, full disclosure, I was one of the original designers of the Victorian one, so it's something very dear to my heart there. A question for Nick, if I could come to you. I suppose it comes down to the crux, the elephant in the room. What's the future look like for PMs? Is there positions becoming available? And I'm glad that question was asked, because I've been reading a lot, particularly from our dear Education Minister, that there's a big push for infrastructure. And I think they're calling it shovel-ready projects, which is a horrendous term in my opinion, as a mere psychologist. What does that career path the career opportunities look like in your opinion, Nick? Or the positions? Nothing else.
Look, I think it's an interesting time, because I think, at risk of being political, there are two elements to this. One, which is there's a lot of muted money that's available to be invested in projects. There's a lot of talk around removing some of the red tape that's existing. There are a lot of clients that we're talking to at the moment that are feeling like they're in a holding pattern. So we have some major clients that have got billions of dollars in projects, but the money's still not trickling through. So the belief is that that money will start to come through at some point. It's always very difficult to say exactly when, but the belief is that there's optimism in the marketplace and the economy, that there is money. And as I kind of referenced earlier, governments are using this as a way to stimulate the economy. So there's definitely been some great announcements around money that will be invested. And I think that's where people should have heart, that money is being invested and that their skills will be required. That's at a local level. I've conducted a presentation before around the shortage of project managers that are going to be required over the next 20 years, global level. So this huge opportunity for the profession of project management to be able to build a career sustainably. You only have to look at, say, defense. They've got a submarine project which is going to be running for 40 years. That's only one particular project, let alone everything that's being talked about in the market. So look, the future does look bright. And there's a lot of talk around the uplift in requirement for project management skills and roles.
Yeah. We've got quite a few questions coming in, and forgive me, folks, if we don't get around to all of them, but we will probably try to address them and circulate them when we put the recording out a bit later. There's quite a few questions coming in regarding MBAs and the number of certificates. I assume people mean qualifications that people may require. And this could be a question to any one of the panel. Is something like an MBA useful to obtain to succeed as a project manager and compete effectively? Anybody have a thought on that? Luke, you're...
Yeah. Well, I've got an MBA. But
and look at you.
But I would say MBA, I did it to complement my technical skill set. And I also think, one of the really important things about studying an MBA is that you do it once you've got some industry experience, so that application is really a lot more tangible for you. And it's also about the network that you're building as your cohort in studying that master's as well, which is, talking to people from different professions and different industries around similar problems. So I would say, MBA is really good to go do. Any form of study is really good to go and do. I continually study and been known to, it's been a bit of a joke amongst my friends and family. Perpetual student. But it's really more important about what you get out of that study. How do you apply it in your workplace? How do you apply it to do bigger and better things and make what you do a lot more effective? So it's a complementary skill set, and should be shown. Should be thrown through your career trajectory.
Right. Okay then. Some questions along the same lines there, and Chris, I may ask you to respond to some of these issues about, could you give a quick summary of the sort of certifications available within the AIPM? There's quite a few questions coming in.
I saw that question. So AIPM provides a certification approach as opposed to a qualification approach, and Lee could describe these in far greater detail, having more involvement. But essentially, we have a registered PM certification which recognises actual experience and knowledge on the job. So if I compare it, say, for example, with the Project Management Institute, the American-based project management organisation, they have a professional project management qualification, which is exam-based, provided you can demonstrate certain experience. But AIPM has registered PM, which you can start off as a certified practicing project practitioner, and for people graduating out of diplomas and degrees that are recognised by the AIPM, you can immediately go into be accepted as a certified practicing project practitioner. And then as you build up experience over time, you may want to upskill to a registered practicing project manager, project director, and so on. So those certifications are constantly being reviewed and updated for the market, but are widely recognised in Australia. And also we have links to overseas institutions as well that we can align with overseas-based qualifications.
Yeah.
Thanks, Lee.
No, thanks, Chris. So in summary, there are 5 certifications available, as Chris is implying. that hopefully gives a bit of a pathway, a bit of a roadmap or a journey for any person who's in the PM field. As Chris said, starting with a project officer, assistant project officer type or project manager role, called the certification of CPP, and then there's CPPM, as the name suggests, project manager, 4 or 5 years experience, project director, senior project manager, project sponsor, project administrators and executive, all sorts of things there. And all that information is available on the AIPM website. So certainly encourage people to have a look at that. A couple of questions, and again,
I'll just say quickly, and a bit of a plug for the Office of Projects Victoria. We also run a project course. It's the Australian Major Projects Leadership Academy. It's for government people all across Australia, and it's done in connection with Oxford University as well. So
okay,
something else.
Good. So you'll make some details available a bit later. Look.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Terrific. A couple of questions, and probably, in fact, to any of you, but maybe Nick at this stage. Quite a few questions about, or you also mentioned soft skills a bit earlier. There's a couple of questions about if you could summarise those again. But a couple of questions regarding the older person entering the PM field, and as one of those older people, I'm very interested in that sort of thing. I mean, I suppose the subtext of today's discussion has been on more recent graduates, presumably the more younger person. But what about, there's a question from a listener. A listener sounds like a radio show, doesn't it? From a 55-year-old entering the field. What sort of advice would you give somebody who's sort of been around for a while, seen a bit, entering the field, as opposed to a new person, that younger person, I suppose?
Look,
the same principles, I suppose.
It's not uncommon, and I think this is where project management is actually a very beautiful profession. And I think one of the critical things here, I think there's elements of realism in that, without necessarily knowing the industry or the sector that particular individual may have a background in, the suggestion would be to align as closely as possible to their previous sector experience, which may make that transition easier, which would mean they would be classed as a subject matter expert. And I think this ties back to the notion of what we're talking about around soft skills. The belief and the expectation is that this individual may, or when I say the cohort of people within that bracket, have no doubt had business experience, are mature in the way that they operate, are probably quite calm under pressure, have the ability to bring people on a journey. And I think there's a lot to be said about organizations hiring and employing those individuals that bring that depth of knowledge. And I think one of the things that's important when you look at the AIPM certification, certainly when you look at CPPP, I think that's the right acronym, it's more around technical skills. And as you progress your career in project management, it actually tends to be focused on softer skills. And it might be things around managing a P&L. It might be things around how many people have you managed, what kind of budgets have you managed. So there are a lot of transferable skills that people can bring to this profession, because for many years we've talked about accidental project managers, and this is absolutely the ability to be able to come in and you can complement a certification along with your practical skills. So there's no reason why those individuals can't be very successful in the market.
Yeah, terrific. And just following on from that, and something you mentioned a bit earlier, there's a few questions I can see about those soft skills. And as somebody who comes from that profession, I'm one of those classic accidental project managers coming from the behavioural sciences and aviation into project management. So we've got two questions that if I could throw at you or Luke, indeed Tamara. We've got a question from somebody who's transitioning from the aviation industry that has those technical skills. And I can share your pain, the person who's sent that. I suppose the subtext of that question is, how do I utilise what I've already got? How do I transition into something, into project management. And I think you sort of, both you and Luke sort of hinted at, you can still do that if you choose the right path. I'll go to Nick first if I could.
Look, it's an interesting one. I actually have a very senior executive that I'm working from the aviation industry. One of the things, so this is actually very relevant. I think what we've talked about is actually distilling the things that they've been involved in and really trying to make it very practical to some of the things that are involved in projects. Because if we look at the Australian economy, and this comes to preparation and information around what's actually happening, there's a lot of muted money that's being invested in space in this particular country, and Australia are looking to invest in space. There's also a lot of money that's being invested in the defence industry. And there's a lot of synergies that parallel across those industries where people from aviation have got some very, very strong skills that they can transition into that market. So I think one of the things that's important is being able to look at the industries that are closely aligned, because that's where people will have great success in transferring their skills. And then looking at the career history they've had and how they can relate that to project management, because there are a lot of intangible skills that can lend you to be very successful in project management over and above your qualifications and certifications.
Okay, that's interesting. Luke, did you have a thought?
Yeah, I mean, Nick's spot on. There's a lot of commonality between different industries and how people, you know, just working in a workplace and the common challenges that every organisation has. Having worked across many different sectors now, a lot of the challenges are very common. And a lot of them are to do with people and how you're communicating an issue and really what's important and how to do your problem solving and get to the core crux of something. So if someone's coming from a different industry and is looking to see what's out there, yeah, stick to something that's very similar and leverage that and really speak up what your previous experience is. It might take a bit of nuancing in the language because every industry has a different language, but understand that. Talk to someone in the industry that you're thinking about and understand how their challenges could be very similar to what they already know and have already addressed.
Yeah. Interesting. Every industry has its language, but at the bottom of it, essentially it's all the same. Yeah. Tamara, a couple of questions, pardon me, about internship. How does one get an internship? What are the recommended steps? And how does one enhance that networking that you referred to as well?
Yep. So in terms of internship, there's a lot of university engagement programs that a lot of companies put on now, and that's where they seek interns. And then they also engage with the university at a lot of university events. And then on top of that, sorry, what was the second part?
Networking.
Oh, yeah. So in terms of networking, there's not only Women in Design and Construction, of course, there's AIPM events, there's PMI, Property Council of Australia. It's all dependent on industry, but even I think LinkedIn now has a section where it does, there's a section where you can select which industry bodies that you want to follow. Yeah. And generally you can find events from that. And that would probably be my recommendation.
Okay. So the social media sort of channels and those platforms are certainly worth exploring. Industry associations, et cetera, as you say there. There's a question for Luke. I was interested in this one. And Chris, my screen has just gone a little bit ballistic, which is a technical term for I can't read it. But I think it was about somebody coming from the events management field.
Yeah, I can cover that one for you. So
if you don't mind, please.
Yeah. So question for Luke. I've just transferred from the events field with a few years experience, currently studying project management with an interest in construction, considering doing a Cert 4 in construction. Do you think that would be worthy to get a toe in the construction field?
Look, yeah, anything to give you that greater insight or experience, or the network to be able to understand that field a lot more in depth is beneficial. Whether that's a Cert 4 or going to speak to some people in that industry, or getting a mentor from that industry, or even doing some volunteering or internship, going work in that sort of industry. It's all about how do you translate your skills and knowledge into something different, and understanding what's important. So yeah, I'd say there's many different ways someone could really understand what the construction industry looks like, a lot more. Certainly Cert 4 is worthwhile in doing that.
Thanks, Luke, and thanks, Chris. Luke, is there a suggestion that is an industry that's going to survive the next little bit more than others, or anybody's guess?
I mean, civil infrastructure. I mean, Nick's talked about it. What I'm hearing is it's going to be a really big budget that's announced by the state government pretty soon, and there's going to be a lot of money for the infrastructure, so civil construction, and that's right across the spectrum, from more road and rail projects right through to more schools, social housing. I mean, there's a heap of stuff that's coming, and I mean, we've all heard the stories around we're in an infrastructure deficit, and this is just about getting towards that curve, and yeah, a lot more money needs to be spent on it, and definitely in terms of Victoria building back to where it was before, the governments are using it as a stimulus tool.
Yeah,
but we're also investing in digital tools as well. So,
yeah.
My office is working on a lot on things like digital engineering, or BIM, but also how do you make that more accessible for a whole project organisation? So it's not just the engineers or the technical people working in that space. It's how's your procurement people, how's your contracts, how's your project controls people work in a more connected fashion.
Right. Thanks, Luke. And Tamara, I suspect you're seeing same sort of thing emerging?
Yeah, I would definitely think so. In terms of, I guess, transferring from different industries, I've got, for instance, a really broad project portfolio. So for me, going from a contractor to consultancy, there was a small amount of challenge, but I was quite young, and I did what the others said and applied those soft skills. And once I've had that technical background in PM as well, I applied all of that knowledge, and that's kind of where I got to.
Yeah. Thanks. Nick, final question for you, and in fact could be a final question for the panel. Soft skills. Tamara just sort of hinted at that again. Very quickly, could you summarize some of those 3 key, indeed 4 key soft skills that you referred to a bit earlier?
Look, I think the main one that consistently comes around is communication. And I think the way that needs to be interpreted is it's in the eye of the beholder. There's many people that say they have great communication when in fact they don't listen to the person that's delivering a message, or giving them time to be able to finish the message that they're delivering. And I think particularly in an environment now where people may or may not be able to assess the body language that you're portraying if you're on a Zoom call, or you're trying to influence people over a social medium, I think they're the things that are really, really important. And I think soft skills, look, for me in particular, and for the industry when we employ, is very much around, look, it is about communication. It really is around the things that, and one of the things I think is really important around this notion is, we haven't touched on it, but emotional intelligence is becoming far more important around what people are doing, the way that they operate. And I mean, emotional intelligence, you could write a whole thesis on that in itself. But I think that's one of the other areas that I think people need to be far more consciously aware of now as well. For anyone who isn't maybe an element of strength. There's plenty of online tools and resources that are available to individuals that can look at emotional intelligence tests, have a bit of an understanding of what does that actually mean. And if anything, just be conscious of it and be aware of it.
Yes.
No one's sitting here saying they're perfect, and we all make errors in all facets of communication, body language, emotion, but it's about being aware of it, acknowledging that, and trying to do your best to continuously learn and evolve with the way that you do things.
Yeah, thank you. Again, wise words there. I'll start to wind up in a moment, but we have 2 or 3 questions from people coming from the aviation sector. And having my foot in that camp, I'm happy to take those questions offline if those questioners want to get in touch, because I can share some thoughts there as well. Look, I would love to explore these concepts and all these important issues a little bit further, but unfortunately time has caught up with us. But on behalf of the AIPM and the university partners, can I thank Luke, Tamara and Nick for giving up your time today and sharing some of your thoughts about and indeed advice on when is somebody ready to be job ready for the project management profession. I'm Lee Simonelli, and I will hand back to Chris to wind up. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you for handling all those questions. Look, we've got a lot of questions that we weren't able to get to. We'll discuss them after this finishes and find a way to try and get answers out to everyone. In particular, I noticed there's a lot of questions regarding international students breaking into the industry, and I know that's a big item. I just want to show one screen that'll give you some information that may be of use to you. So firstly, if there were some questions about the Australian Institute of Project Management, about the certified courses that we, the courses that we recognise, about certifications, about membership and about events. So I've put there in the institution both my email address and the AIPM website. So I welcome you to go and have a look more at that and send me questions if you need help. There were questions about university and industry engagement, in particular, how do you get into internships and so on. So we provided all of the university points of contact here, so that should you want to follow that up in more detail with your own university, there is the points of contact for you to get in touch with and ask those questions. This is our first event that we've run with the Australian Institute of Project Management and the Victorian University Special Interest Group. We're very keen to find out from you how you think it went and provide feedback for future events, future topics that would be of interest to you. So please, if you can take note of that SurveyMonkey survey there, or the barcode there, that'll take you straight to the survey. Please, I encourage you to fill that out so we can get some feedback from you as the audience as to how you felt it went. And finally, as Siobhan said at the outset, this has been recorded, so we'll find a way to get this out to all registered attendees, so you can catch up with it and go into the details. And I guess that leaves me with no other task except to say thank you very much to Siobhan and Monash University for hosting it. Thank you, our 3 wise panelists. Thank you, Lee, for facilitation. Thank you to all of the university people that are listed on there for their enthusiasm and contribution getting this off. And most of all, thank you to the audience somewhere out there in the Ethernet. It's really weird not being able to see you, but I know there was about 120 or so people. Really appreciate your support and interest, and we hope to catch up with you at the next future event. Thank you.